I just don't care how old it is or how you're going to cook it. If you were going to cook up lamb for me, I'll just eat it. It's so delicious. I just love eating it.
Hi, everybody. You're with Dani Valent, and this is Dirty Linen, my podcast about food. Love doing this. Really appreciate your time, your attention, your ears. There are so many things you could be listening to, and I'm really grateful that you've chosen to spend some time with me. If you love what you're listening to, tell your friends. More people is good in the Dirty Linen gang. Leave us a review and a rating on whichever app you're listening to the pod. 5 stars gets us out to more people, which is good too. We like to think that we are talking about important things on this podcast. It's important to gather around the table, virtual or real, and we love to do that with our guests on this show. We also really love a series. So I love dotting in little mini-series to the general run of play on Dirty Linen, and we are doing one of those today. We're chatting to Jenna Abbruzzese, chef turned lamb farmer at Addington Downs in Victoria. This is going to be an ongoing series. Episode 1 has already dropped, so we will put a link to that in the show notes, but stick with us to hear more about life with Jenna on the farm, learning lots and sharing as she goes. Jenna, welcome back to Dirty Linen.
Good morning.
How are things on the farm at the moment?
Quite good. We just picked up some new sheep yesterday and our new ram. So that's exciting. Most people are joining at the moment, which means you put the ram with the girls and hopefully everyone does their bit, and then in the spring everyone gets lambs. So yeah, it's fun. It's exciting. It's logistically sometimes a bit tricky, but I wouldn't mind some rain, actually. I start to sound like a proper farmer. It feels a bit dry the last few days, just the air and the pasture. But yeah, hopefully the girls love the new fella and we're good to go.
What are some of the ways that you encourage the joining and notice whether or not it's happened? Like, how do you know if the young man is doing his job?
Yes, that's a good question. So something that I noticed when I was watching, researching, reading, finding out all about farming sheep was that Australians have huge farms, massive farms, because we just have that much land. And in the UK, there are more small holdings, a lot smaller farms. Like in the district, there'll be heaps more farmers because they just have all these smaller parcels of land. Whereas for us, someone can own thousands of hectares. It's not really the case there. So I follow a lot of British farmers or Irish and Welsh farmers, and a lot of them use a crayon or what they call a rattle, where, back in hundreds of years ago, they would grind a red stone down to make like a red paste to mark their sheep, to be able to know whose sheep are who, because the townships, the villages, just at different times of the year, they let their sheep run up the mountains or the hills, and they all get mixed up, and then everyone has to come together and bring them all down to the commons and separate them all back so that you take your sheep home and your neighbour takes theirs. So they do all these different things to identify their sheep. So the rattle is like a paste, a coloured paste that they put on the chest of the ram, who then mounts the ewe and marks the back end of the ewe to say, I have serviced her. I liked that idea when I saw it. I was like, oh, that will make because I'm obsessed with organisation and planning and everything. It will make it really efficient for us if we know when each ewe is due to lamb, so we can plan our weeks, and because we both have to work as well, so it's very good for planning. So you can put a harness with a crayon marker on the chest of the ram. So we did that last year on Bruno, the white fin ram, and it worked. And the dates, it's pretty accurate. The dates match up, and will not ever not do that again. Like, it's a fantastic way to track who's being serviced when and what's going on. But with this tiny little mob that we have, and because we're out there every day watching them, it's very clear who's in heat or coming on or in like, there's a really short window, like about 24 hours of standing heat, when the ewe will stand for the ram. If she doesn't want to, she will run away. So it's very hard for him sometimes because he is on all the time. So yeah, it's very interesting. You have to watch the behavior and see what's happening. But the crayon is a great way to see what's happening.
Just for people who perhaps, haven't listened to episode 1 and don't know sort of your learning trajectory, would it be fair to say that you really didn't know any of this stuff but when you started?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, I've taken an interest in farming generally because of being a chef using meat, and the provenance of the meat is important to us and generally in the types of places I worked at. But I mean, one or two farm visits, in a 5-year time frame, like over 20 years of cooking, that's not really a lot of exposure to many farms. And also they're very specific sort of boutique farms producing that style of meat for high-end restaurants. I guess my partner, Alex, her family farm, again, my father-in-law and my mother-in-law had no experience in farming when they started their cattle farm. And so I think, if I'm honest, that was a big relief to me. Like, their first generation, they went out and had a crack on their own, they worked as well while they were building their farm. So I thought, well, if they can do it, then we can do it. Yeah, absolutely. Didn't know a thing.
What are some of the things that you've learned that have been the most satisfying or surprising?
I think surprising is maybe not surprising because I'm a highly emotional person. So like the emotions around, bringing life, like watching life into the world and then literally driving that life to its death at the abattoir, that roller coaster of emotions is what it is. I'm used to managing my emotions, but I think Alex probably, she could probably do without so much, so much chaos in our life. But that sort of level of connection, and also then being connected with the customers, I mean, that's what I've sought. So that's what I've found. But I guess surprising is how to navigate what the consumers want and expect, and also trends around small farming, boutique farming. So no chemicals, no vax, no inputs, pure meat. That for me is something that it will be ongoing, and navigating that as we get more experience under our belt and as I learn more about ideals and practice, because you can have all these ideas about how you want your meat to be raised and what you want to buy, and I want it to be organic, I want it to be biodynamic, I don't want it to be vaxxed and all of this. But in reality, nature is not that kind. And farming, that's the other thing that I'm getting my head around. Farming essentially is putting animals in captivity to raise them to eat for meat or milk, or to grow them for their fibre to make clothes from. And so this idea that they're in the wild and they'll just run up the paddock and they can just, the toughest will survive. I mean, I don't really subscribe to that. That's a very idealistic way of viewing farming. And that person that lets the mob of shedding sheep, that shedders or shedding sheep, they don't grow wool that's able to be harvested for fibre. So when the weather starts to warm up, they start to shed their wool, so they don't need to be shorn. And often they're good for farming in this country because of our weather. Anyway, I don't want to go off too much on a tangent, but you can let your mob of shedders loose in the paddock and just get them down into the yards once or twice a year, and isn't that great? But that farmer still buys his woolly jumper from somewhere, his or her, and they also still buy their milk from either the IGA or the supermarket or wherever. So you can stick to those ideals for your own farm, but I think it would be very hard to stick to them overall in your life, because you still want to drink milk and you still want to wear your clothes. So for us, that's for me, that's a big like, not an issue, but like for us to be able to achieve that, because we do produce our own fibre already. We sell yarn via our website, and so we have the fleece from our alpacas and our sheep sent to the mill. The mill is a very small mill run by a husband and wife, and they mill our fleece into fibre. And so the next step will be milk, because we have the fibre in the form of yarn, we have the meat that we sell in our boxes, and then we're going to move towards milk. And to be able to do those three products from the ewes that we have and the girls, the alpacas, and be able to farm them in a way that I think that tries very hard to, stick to those principles that the consumers, the customers are wanting you to, and you also want to, but at the same time, we can't just afford for 10 ewes to drop dead in the paddock because we're trying to breed the most resilient sheep. Like that's not viable. And so where do you draw the line with intervention and letting nature run its course? That for me has been the trickiest part of this.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I suppose, sometimes consumers want to sort of outsource their purity, and that, someone else takes the risks and manages the difficulty of sticking to some kind of philosophy very rigidly. And if you could wouldn't it be, well, maybe I'm a consumer and I just want to pay for someone else to do that, and I'll pay a bit more for my meat because someone else is, managing the difficulty of the purity. But I feel like I'm actually not that person. I would rather be the person that trusts you as the farmer whose ideals and values I respect, and the wrestling with those values I also respect. And then if you decide that it's necessary on balance to vaccinate or whatever it is, give an antibiotic, whatever it is, then I would like to trust that you've made the best decision for yourself as a small farmer and for the animals that you want to nurture in the best way possible to the end of their life that we've, between us decided is expendable for our nourishment.
Yeah, exactly. And that essentially is where knowing your farmer, which is so many people that I have taken inspiration from and learnt from, that's their mantra. Like that's why people should go to farmers markets or source a box direct from the grower. You can then be tapped into what they're doing. You can ask them questions. You can find out why, and they usually are very proud to talk about their farm and their products. And that's where, knowing your grower, knowing your farmer comes in. And the trust that you build between, I feel like it's a big deal to be able to grow people's food. And so you build this trust with like people who are doing other things in our society that we need that can't grow the food. And so it's a real, you scratch mine, I'll scratch yours situation where we must work together to get the outcomes that we want for our health and for the animal welfare, and generally just to consume less shit, right? Like, we just don't want to consume all the time. So how do we minimize waste? And like all these little things that add up to what are our core values, they are in line with the customers and happy days, essentially. That's, we're not for everyone. Not everyone can be for everyone. And so if more people can get their head around that, what is acceptable to some is not to others, and that's all right. You just choose who you want to partner up with and who you want to buy from.
Yeah, I feel like, leaning very heavily on labels like organic or biodynamic, or let's not say labels, certifications, can be part of this general desire for simplicity.
Big greenwashing.
Well, like that things can either be good or not good. It's like it's okay to eat or it's not okay to eat. Whereas actually, in this world, we are more beset by shades of grey than we are by the black and white. And I think the more that we understand that in every arena of our lives, the more we can sort of stand together to navigate it. I feel like that someone wants to outsource their black and white thinking or impose that black and white thinking onto a farmer. Like, I just can only imagine how dispiriting it might be for a farmer to be at a farmer's market and someone comes up and says, is it biodynamic? Well, short answer, no. And then that is off the table for that person when there's so much else behind that one word. I can only imagine how dispiriting that might be when someone isn't open to the complexities of farming. Having said that, we're all called upon to make so many decisions so every day. So you can't be an expert on everything. But then I suppose I circle back to trust. I don't really necessarily need to know about all your decisions.
Yeah, day in, day out, everything.
Yeah. I suppose it's like we need to trust the experts to be the experts.
Like I pay my subscription to The Age because I know that DV is earning a living from writing her articles in the newspaper. Like there's a connection where people have jobs, they have their livelihoods, and you can choose to support that or you choose to put your money somewhere else. But essentially, we all have the opportunity to support each other, like literally directly, in a way, if you just take 2 minutes to think about it, So, yeah, the world is insane, but there is a fair bit of control that each of us have by just choosing where to put our money, where to spend our money.
Well, thank you for subscribing so that, I can, eat nice lamb sometimes. Okay, so Jenna, I'd love you to talk more about the emotion of farming animals for food. Alex doesn't have to listen to this, so she's heard enough of the emotion, but I want all of it. Like, what is it like? Like, these animals. How do you help them along that journey?
I don't want to paint Alex with a brush that sort of insinuates that she doesn't care.
I don't either.
But she's a much more pragmatic sort of like problem solution, let's go. Like I get bogged down in, a lot of torment, I guess. And so I think like, actually, you know what? A few years ago, I listened to How Now, and she talked about, I think your pod with her, she was talking about a fellow dairy farmer that had said to her, I wonder sometimes whether my girls are depressed. The farmer, it wasn't her farm talking about her cows. It was a conventional dairy farmer who was sort of, like made to think a bit more about her farm because of what Kathy was doing. So, and I actually started crying when I heard her say that because I can't imagine going out in the paddock and just like being around depressed animals every day. Like, and so I thought about that a lot. And then it made me think a lot about dairy. And I was already upset about the people eating goat's cheese, smashed avo goat's cheese, and no one eating baby goats. And then Kathy was talking about that, same with veal, and that's another whole issue. And so this is where the obsession with becoming the sheep dairy comes from. And it's got to do with welfare and keeping the lambs or the calves on their mums. If we want to take the milk for our own consumption, then we must do it in a responsible way. And then, actually experiencing that, because it's one thing to think about it and talk about it and carry on, but unless you actually do it, take the lamb away from its mum, you can't really feel the emotions. So
I'll just jump in, Jenna, briefly for people who haven't heard that podcast from a few years ago with Kathy Palmer from How Now Dairy. What Kathy does is keeps the calves with their mums for a long period of time. In traditional dairy, the calves are removed from the mums basically straight away. And the mums are sad about that, but it means that the dairy gets all of that milk. How Now shares the milk with the calves and the consumer. So it's a completely different way of operating. It makes the milk more expensive, but there's a pretty obvious reason for that. So Jenna, over to you.
So I have seen it. So Kathy's the first person to do it in this country. I've seen this with goat dairies, like, my friend Olivia at Wedgetail, she kid shares, and so the kids are kept with their mums. And Holy Goat, the pinnacle of goat cheese in this country, same situation, sharing the kids. But sheep dairying in this country is so not popular. I think there's 4 sheep dairies in the last couple of years that have closed down. So it's hard for me to get info here about how everyone does it. But I just know that from Kathy and Olivia and Holy Goat that it can be done, and that's what we will do. But it's interesting going from, very first lambing to ewes and then seeing the relationship between the mums and the lambs, and then getting to and just letting things happen as naturally as possible. And we lost one ewe. So that was huge learning. We lost one of those ewes and it was totally out of the blue. I can't even think now, after having more experience, what the signs were. And if that was a conventional farmer, one ewe, they don't even care. You just built into your business plan that you will lose a percentage of ewes every year or sheep every year. They just die. That's just built into your model. For me, that's not good enough. You would drive down the highway and see mobs of sheep in 35-degree heat with no shade. I don't think that's good enough. So there's all these things that we try and incorporate into what we're doing to make sure the welfare is there, but also make sure that they're not being mollycoddled so that, we're not weakening our mob. And so when we get to weaning time, it's very clear that the ewes are totally sick of their lambs. When you get to a point and you're like, oh my God, I do not want to feed that thing one more time, and they kick them off, they run away from them. And so it's very interesting to watch when that starts to happen, and then it's time. Or if the ewe is losing condition, there's a reason for that. Some ewes are just built to absolutely pump the milk out, and her body is engineered to just make milk, and she will sacrifice herself to just feed her lamb. They're not all like that. That's what I've noticed. Some ewes will preserve themselves, preserve their body, and not just keep generating milk, and then you'll see the lamb drop off a bit. So that's what I guess people have lots of different ways to measure these things in huge mobs. They have computers and they run them all through on the scales and keep all the data. And there's things like lamb plan and, eye muscle depth is measured. And there's all these different ways to measure all these things in these huge mobs and on big farms, so that they can then choose the genetics that are best, to go forward. So we can breed a dorper that will be able to live off 2 leaves of salt bush out in the desert for 6 months of the year. I'm just, making up something, but that is essentially how we are pushing the genetics forward to suit the style of farming that people want. But for us, we just go outside and watch them. And like, I am obsessed with weighing the sheep, weighing the lambs, and I do love data and I love a spreadsheet and I love to analyze things because I think that's a great way to make decisions, but also just actually looking at what's going on outside and seeing how the animals respond to different food and different situations in the seasons. And that to me is like a combination of both of the, the conventional way and this very old-fashioned way of like the shepherd being with their mob and their flock and observing. Yeah.
But doesn't that ongoing connection and that observation and that just being there in the paddock and knowing them make it even harder to send them to the abattoir?
So the thing about it is, I think you hear a lot of farmers talk about their girls, and like in a drought time, you see farmers weeping because they have to send off their girls that are usually kept as their mob to breed from. Everyone knows that you're sending lambs and sending calves off to market every year or however you do it. But your girls are your main mob that you breed from, and without them, you don't have a farm, you don't have a business. So it's one thing to send the progeny off because that's all built into us that we know that that's going to happen. It's another thing to lose girls. And at the moment we have bought a few cheap old girls to start our journey. So, you spend a lot on beautiful young ewes, and then every now and again you might get a few old girls that someone wants to move along and they'll say, you'll get a season out of them. And, that's how it works. And so to save a few bucks, you get a couple of old girls. And right now, and I thought, that's why I created the Chef's Cuts box to have a way to sell tricky cuts that are not popular, that not everyone knows how to cook, and also to sell the cull ewes, the meat that comes from our cull ewes, because I sort of saw all these problems that people were having before we started off. And one was in dairy, there's a problem with being able to sell the progeny of the milking girls. And so I fixed that by, selling our young lambs and being committed to educating the customer about young lamb and how that leads to more ethical dairy. And so that's how we have our young lamb boxes. But the Chef's Cuts box is a way to make sure that the cull ewes are not wasted, because that is a big issue for me, waste. We cannot waste anything. We should honour those ewes by eating them. They are nutrient dense, amazing meat that is undervalued, and there are so many cooking styles suited to that older meat. So, but yeah, I've got Joan up the paddock, and Joan is not going in a Chef's Cuts box. I don't know how I would send her. I love her. So yeah, it's tricky, but you can't do that with every ewe, and she is a unique ewe. So we're too small to carry pets, and I was very hardline about this at the beginning, but now I'm just What
is it about Joan?
Oh, she's just beautiful. She's a smoocher, and so sometimes some ewes will keep their distance, and they just want to graze away, and they don't care that you're in the paddock, but they're not going to come over for a pat. But some ewes come over and they will just, like my older goat, Blanca, she comes up and she goes hard for a scratch, on your body. She's just going away. And that only happens that happens not with everyone. It happens with a few. And so, this is where Alex comes in. She accepts that there is a few retirement, nursing home girls, but we cannot have many. So that's good because, you need the balance. You need someone to balance you out. Otherwise, I just have retirement village. And that's not that we can't, we're too small.
Jenna, you mentioned you've got your chef's cuts, you've got your young lamb. You're sort of not producing the same lamb that a lot of people would find at the supermarket. But you're a chef and you've cooked lamb forever. I'm just wondering, can you talk a bit about eating lamb and cooking lamb and, perhaps some tips that you've got for people?
Well, it's sort of a bit, whether it's right or wrong to say this or not, it's a bit like fake it until you make it with our lamb. And I know now, after getting the feedback that we've got from our boxes, that we're not faking it anymore. Like, the feedback's phenomenal and I'm very happy with how that's gone. But at the beginning, the idea to sell this in between lamb, it's not milk-fed lamb and it's not, ready to go like fat lambs conventional farming, 50 kilos at the sale yards. So, and there was no way to order that age of lamb really. I've never worked with lamb that's only 4 months old in any restaurant. You can't easily order that every week. So we just had to try with the first 2 ewes. We had the mobile butcher come and process that batch of 5 lambs, and we tried the meat. And so that was done at home on our property. And I guess, we were just quite committed by then. And so I was just like, fingers crossed, this is going to be delicious, because how are we going to go back from this? So, of course, thankfully, that those little lambs are amazing for very simple, very low, not too much flavour, just salt, little bit of pepper, really simple cooking, which I think people are sort of leaning into nowadays because they're busy and, that people want things to be a lot less mucked around with. But the older style ewes, they're so good for cooking big, bold, beautiful flavours like the Middle Eastern flavours, like the way that I learned to cook at Rumi. Because mostly that's not, most of those restaurants, like as in, like Lebanese, Turkish, Iraqi and Iranian restaurants are using older lambs. So maybe even two-tooth, and mutton features hugely in those cuisines. And so it's big, bold flavours that lend themselves to heavy spices and lots of beautiful dressings and, sauces made with herbs and sugar and vinegar. And so I think that because of the way we're farming, we can cover the bases of how I want to eat lamb, which is in every possible way, young and sweet and delicious, and older with big, bold flavors. And because I need to get my spice hit, and also for the barbecue on charcoal, cooking on charcoal. So I just don't care how old it is or how you're going to cook it. If you were going to cook up lamb for me, I'll just eat it. It's so delicious. I just love eating it.
I would love to cook some lamb for you one day, Jenna. I might be a little bit nervous.
Yes.
Okay, so...
Oh, no, everyone.
One of the great things about this chat is that I have so much more I want to talk to you about, but I also know we're going to have the chance to do that in future conversations. So let's wrap it up for today, but let's just talk as we do say goodbye about Grounded, which we're both going to be at April 21, 22, farming festival that's convened by Matthew Evans. What are you going to be doing at Grounded, and what do you think people should get excited about?
Well, I went to the very first Grounded in Tasmania a couple of years ago. I went with my bosses, Nats and Jono from Brooklands Farms, and it was awesome. They gifted me a ticket for my Christmas bonus, so it was very exciting to go on a little trip. But it was more exciting to be immersed in a couple of like this basically it's a festival for regenerative farming, for farming things differently, for farming things in a, in a way that lots of people are wanting to buy meat from these farmers now. So learning about the health of the landscape and how we can impact that by grazing, learning about nutrient density and how we're getting closer to being able to measure that more easily, to people like Felice Jacka, who is doing so much work on how the gut microbiome is linked to our psychological state and how that impacts, how we basically navigate the world and how mental health. And I mean, it's amazing. There's going to be so many people there talking about, experts in their field, talking to people who are just so passionate about producing better food for us to eat. So yeah, it's just going to be like a love fest of people that love good food, which, I mean, why wouldn't you want to go?
Yeah. So Jenna will be there. I'll be there. Felice Jacka will be there. We recently had her on the pod, so I'll put a link to that. I've got a lot of links to remember to put in these show notes. Jenna, thanks for coming back for round 2 on Dirty Linen. I look forward to the next episode with you. Like all the best with the farm. Hope the rain kicks in and it all goes along swimmingly.
Awesome. Thanks, Dani. We'll see you at Grounded in a couple of weeks.
This is Dirty Linen. I'm Dani Valent. We bring you untold stories from the food world. Real, raw, unafraid, hopeful. We're driven by a belief that food provides endless opportunities for learning, connecting, and creating the world we want to live in. Delicious, open-hearted, meaningful. If you know a story that needs telling, get in touch. Write to dirtyLinen@deepintheweeds.com.au. Thank you for listening.
This is a Deep in the Weeds production.